From the moment you read it, the title punches through the noise. It tells you that someone crossed a line, a cruel, racial line, and it makes one promise. Karma never forgets. This is not just a story about workplace injustice. It's a slow-burning reckoning drenched in humiliation, silence, and ultimately, vindication. It's about how the smallest ember of dignity can spark a wildfire of justice. This title speaks to a truth many know too well. In a world where injustice hides in plain sight, sometimes karma becomes the loudest voice in the room. The central theme of this story is divine justice disguised as karma. It's about a man who faces prejudice, not in the streets or history books, but in a polished office, behind a fake corporate smile. It's about how one person's cruelty can awaken something greater, the spiritual law of return. It's a revenge story, yes, but it's also a story of redemption and resilience. The employee, a quiet, hard-working black man, is pushed to the edge by a manager who sees his skin before his skill. But what the manager doesn't see is that every insult, every humiliation, is a seed being planted. And karma waters it. The story explores how power dynamics can corrupt, and how those who abuse their authority often think they're untouchable until the very foundation beneath them begins to crack. The narrative flips the script. It takes the reader from anger to satisfaction, from rage to poetic justice. The emotion that will dominate this story is a sharp cocktail of injustice, anticipation, and a sweet, soul-satisfying revenge that doesn't need fists, only truth. This story falls under the drama and social justice fiction categories, with elements of moral thriller. It taps into real-world experiences while keeping a high-stakes narrative arc. It's a corporate battlefield laced with microaggressions, ego, and control, but the twist is, the underdog won't stay down. This story will make you angry. It will make you want to scream. But by the end, it will make you breathe deeply and say, that's what he deserved. The emotional journey is crafted to pull readers from helplessness to empowerment, ensuring they feel every sting and every triumph. This isn't just about one employee. It's about every person who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or disrespected, only to rise when it mattered most. Where's your uniform, Marcus? Or, do you people not believe in dressing properly? The words sliced through the air like knives. Cold. Sharp. Laced with arrogance. The kind that doesn't scream. It sneers. Marcus froze, standing at the break room doorway, holding his morning coffee, steam curling upward like a question mark. The office fell silent. A few eyes lifted. Most dropped back to their keyboards, pretending not to hear. Pretending not to care. "Excuse me?" Marcus asked, softly, not because he didn't hear, but because he wanted the man to repeat it. Clearly. The manager, Mr. Blake, smirked. His suit too tight for his ego, his tie like a leash he somehow thought gave him authority. "I said," he repeated louder now, "you're not in uniform. Again. Or are you planning to freestyle corporate dress codes this week too?" Marcus glanced down. Pressed shirt. Slacks. Clean shoes. The same thing he wore last week. And the week before. Just like everyone else. But Marcus wasn't like everyone else, was he? Not in Mr. Blake's eyes. It wasn't the first time. And it wouldn't be the last. "I'm dressed according to code, sir," Marcus replied. Calm. Controlled. Not because he didn't feel anger rise in his throat like bile, but because he had learned how dangerous that anger could be when it came in black skin. "Sure," Mr. Blake said, lips curling upward. "We'll see what HR thinks. Might be time for another review. We like to keep things professional here." Laughter. Not from everyone. Just a chuckle from someone in the corner pretending to stir their coffee. The room cracked but didn't shatter. Like a storm threatening to break, but not yet spilling. And Marcus? He took a breath. Deep. Like a diver sinking into water so dark he couldn't see the bottom. He walked away. But the echo of those words? They followed. Every step back to his desk felt heavier. Every glance felt like a spotlight. Every keystroke sounded louder than it should. And inside? A quiet earthquake. Not rage. Not yet. Just that aching, familiar tremor of being seen as less. Again. Lunch came.
People passed by his desk.
No eye contact. A few half smiles. But no one said it. No one said, that was wrong. No one said, I heard it too. Silence was louder than anything Blake had spoken. And Marcus knew that silence was complicity dressed in office casual. But what choice did he have?
Quit. Complain?
Be labeled as the angry black man? The troublemaker? The one who couldn't take a joke.
So he sat.
And typed. And endured. Because some battles don't happen in alleyways. They happen in boardrooms. In email threads. In performance reviews that suddenly turn cold. But karma? Karma doesn't care about cubicles and corner offices. And on that day, something shifted. Not on the outside, but inside Marcus.
He didn't know it yet.
But something deep within him whispered. Watch. Just watch. It started with a small email. Sent that afternoon. A quiet note to HR requesting clarity on dress code policies. Neutral in tone. Professional. Strategic. No accusations. Just facts. And that email? It was the first domino. But Marcus didn't send it for revenge. Not yet. He sent it because his soul had taken one cut too many. And he knew, either he stood now or he'd fall forever. Marcus Hale was the kind of man people overlooked until they needed him. Mid-30s. Calm voice. Measured footsteps. The kind of presence that didn't demand a room, but somehow steadied it. His smile was the quiet kind. Not loud, not flashy, but real. Earned. He was a systems analyst at Aldridge and Cole Financial.
6 years in.
Not flashy work, but precise. Efficient. He kept the tech infrastructure clean, the networks running, and the data safe. Clients didn't know his name, but they benefited from every spreadsheet he stabilized, every server he restored at 2 a.m. during company outages. But no one noticed that kind of work. And in Marcus's experience, the ones who noticed often didn't say it out loud. Not to him. Not unless they needed something. He lived in a modest apartment on the south side of the city.
Clean.
Organized. His fridge was always stocked, even if his weekends were usually quiet. He wasn't married. No kids. But he had a sister, Nia, and a nephew who adored him more than superheroes. To Nia, Marcus was the rock. The one who always answered the phone, no matter how late. The one who showed up, even when the world didn't show up for him. What made Marcus different wasn't his intelligence, though he had that in spades. It was his restraint. His ability to hold it all in when others would explode. To swallow the sting.
To keep the peace.
Not because he was weak, but because he knew the price of being seen as too loud, too emotional, too aggressive. He had grown up watching his father, a factory worker, get talked over, passed by, shut down. He remembered the nights his mother wiped tears from her husband's face when he thought no one was looking. Marcus learned early. Black men in white spaces had to move carefully. Even now, he could hear his father's voice. Don't let them catch you slipping. Not even once. So Marcus never slipped. He arrived on time, stayed late, picked up the slack, smiled when ignored, bit his tongue when insulted. And every day, he tucked his dignity into his chest pocket like a fragile piece of glass. But lately, the pressure had built. It wasn't just Mr. Blake's passive-aggressive comments. It was the microaggressions layered like bricks on his back. The way people spoke over him in meetings but echoed his ideas 10 minutes later like they thought of it themselves. The way promotions came and went, skipping him like he was invisible. The way HR smiled tight when he asked about advancement, like they were rehearsing a line they'd given many times before. He told himself it didn't matter. He had job security. He had peace. But peace without respect? That's not peace. It's quiet oppression. And Marcus felt it now. In his bones. He used to think if he just worked hard enough, he'd be too valuable to ignore. But this morning's humiliation made one thing very clear. No matter how hard you work, if someone decides you're less, they'll treat you like less. And yet he wasn't bitter. Not yet. He was reflective. Focused. A chess player, not a boxer. And that's what made him dangerous. Because while Mr. Blake thrived on confrontation, on public dominance, Marcus played the long game.
He didn't yell. He documented.
He didn't threaten. He observed.
He didn't swing.
He planned. That's why when he sent that email to HR, it wasn't impulsive. It wasn't about one insult. It was the start of a ledger, a record, a trail of accountability. He knew the weight of words, and he was done letting other people's go unchallenged. He started collecting moments, saving emails, noticing patterns,
Dates.
names, eyewitnesses, comments made too loudly in the hallway, performance reviews that suddenly shifted in tone, tasks reassigned without explanation, the coworker who whispered, "I heard what he said. I'm sorry," but still wouldn't back him publicly. He was building a case, but not just legally, spiritually, because Marcus didn't believe karma was just some mystical energy floating in the sky. To him, karma was math. Input equals output. What you give comes back, eventually. And Marcus was patient. That's what scared men like Blake the most. Not rage, not noise, but silence. Controlled silence. Strategic silence. The kind of silence that sees everything and says nothing until it's too late to stop it. So, who was Marcus? He was every underestimated man. Every quiet soul mistaken for weak. Every person who learned to endure before they were allowed to rise. But most of all, he was ready. Not for a fight. Not for revenge. But for correction. Because some storms don't come to destroy. They come to rearrange. And Marcus Hale was about to become the storm they never saw coming. It started with an email. Innocent on the surface. Neutral even. Subject: clarification request, dress code policy. Marcus sent it at 3:42 p.m. on a Thursday. No accusation. No tone. Just a polite inquiry. Could you please confirm the official dress code policy? I would like to ensure I'm in compliance moving forward. HR responded the next morning. A 2-sentence reply. Hi Marcus. Thank you for reaching out. The company policy allows business casual attire unless otherwise specified for client-facing roles. Let us know if you have further questions. Tracy, HR coordinator. That should have been the end of it. But Blake wasn't finished. By 10:05 a.m., Marcus was summoned to his office. No explanation. Just a calendar notification titled, Performance Touch Base. 15 minutes. No agenda. The moment he stepped into the room, he knew. Blake didn't look up at first. Just tapped his pen on a legal pad. Slowly. Deliberately. As if rehearsing control. So, he finally said, I hear you've been asking questions. Marcus stood, hands loosely at his sides.
Calm. Still.
Just wanted to make sure I'm clear on company policies. You know, Blake said, standing now, walking toward the window like this was a scene in some legal drama. It's funny. The timing. Suddenly sending emails to HR right after a simple comment about your appearance. Marcus didn't respond. Blake turned, leaned against the sill, arms crossed. I have to wonder, he continued. Are you trying to stir something up, Marcus? There it was. The threat behind the smirk. Because if that's the case, Blake added, you might want to think about whether this is the right environment for you. Marcus tilted his head. Are you suggesting I'm not a good fit? Blake smiled. Too wide. I'm suggesting that some people thrive here, and some struggle. And I'd hate to see you become the latter. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every word replaying like static in his head. He wasn't angry. He was awake. Fully awake now to the game being played. This wasn't about a shirt or an email. It was about control. Blake wanted submission masked as professionalism. He wanted silence wrapped in smiles. But Marcus wasn't submitting. Not anymore. The next morning, he sent a new email. Subject: follow-up on concerns raised in manager meeting. This time, it was documented. Timestamps. Exact phrasing. No accusations, just observations. He CC'd HR, blind CC'd his private email, attached the policy document, cited the date.
the time.
Mentioned the shift in tone and the suggestion he might not belong. Still calm. Still composed. But now, traceable. What Marcus didn't know was that something bigger had already been set in motion. Across the building, in a closed-door conference room, a compliance audit was quietly being conducted. The company had been under review for diversity metrics. It wasn't public knowledge yet. Not even mid-management knew. But Blake's department had come up red more than once. Hiring patterns, promotion gaps, complaint resolutions swept under the rug. And this email? This one for Marcus? It landed on the radar of someone far above Blake's pay grade. An internal audit manager named Delaney. Quiet, sharp, and deadly when she sniffed patterns. By Monday, Delaney had compiled Marcus's emails with 2 other previous complaints, both informal, both unresolved. She flagged the thread, labeled it pattern of discriminatory behavior, escalation candidate, and scheduled an unannounced departmental observation. But none of that had reached Marcus yet. From his perspective, things were getting worse. That Tuesday, he arrived to find his access badge wouldn't open the employee entrance. A small inconvenience. Probably a glitch. IT reset it after 30 minutes. But it felt deliberate. Wednesday, Blake reassigned one of Marcus's projects without notice, gave it to a junior analyst with less experience. Thursday, his calendar was mysteriously blocked out by HR prep, performance metrics review. When he asked about it, no one gave a straight answer. It wasn't paranoia. It was pressure. Blake was building a case, trying to provoke a reaction, trying to get Marcus to break. But Marcus didn't break. He gathered. He kept a spreadsheet, logged every change, every email, every comment,
Names. Dates.
the works. And then, the final match hit the powder keg. Friday afternoon, Blake called a team meeting. Casual. Popcorn and drinks in the lounge. A new tradition, he said. Team Vibe Fridays. Everyone showed up, Marcus included. And then, during the laughter and fake camaraderie, Blake stood in front of everyone and said, back in my day, we didn't run to HR over every little thing. We just manned up. Didn't need policies to tell us how to dress. People froze. Marcus didn't. He stood. Walked over.
Calm. Slow.
Was that directed at me? He asked. Blake grinned. If the shoe fits. The room buzzed. Low murmurs. Eyes darted. Marcus nodded. Then turned to the others. For anyone listening, he said clearly, voice unwavering. This is the second time my manager has made a public remark questioning my professionalism and tying it to dress code, even after HR clarified I'm in compliance. I just want everyone here to witness that. Silence.
Thick. Heavy.
Blake tried to laugh it off. Hey, let's not make a thing. But it was already a thing. Because 2 people in that room were already under review for other compliance concerns. One woman, Karen, from accounting, looked down at her drink. Another, Luis, from logistics, walked out without a word. And on Monday morning, Delaney from compliance pulled every security recording from the lounge. Marcus still didn't know. But karma was moving now.
Fast.
Blake thought he was in control. But control is a funny thing. It only works until it doesn't. Marcus didn't walk into work Monday morning with his head down. No, he held it high, not from pride, but clarity. Something had shifted inside him. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was watching, documenting, learning the terrain of a battlefield he hadn't chosen, but would no longer retreat from. Still, he had no idea how deep this rabbit hole would go. At 8:15 a.m., just 15 minutes after he arrived, an unexpected calendar invite popped up. Check-in with corporate compliance, Delaney Rivers. It wasn't from HR. It wasn't from Blake. It was from someone he'd never heard of. The meeting was in 15 minutes. Location, 14th floor, executive conference room. He checked the company directory. Delaney Rivers, Senior Compliance Director. Oversaw ethics investigations, DI audits, and executive performance evaluations. This wasn't routine. This was serious. Marcus took a deep breath. Something was happening behind the curtain. As he entered the elevator, He passed Blake in the hallway. The manager shot him a smug glance, one of those cocky little smirks that dripped with the kind of arrogance only people with unchecked power seemed to carry. "Early riser, huh?" Blake called out. Marcus just nodded.
The doors closed.
As the elevator climbed, so did his heart rate. He wasn't scared. Not anymore. He was aware, and that was a weapon in itself. The 14th floor was quiet.
Carpeted.
Softer lighting. A world away from the buzzing cubicles below. He found the conference room. Knocked lightly. A woman in her early 40s looked up from a file. Neat bob haircut. Crisp white blouse. Eyes sharp as glass. "You must be Marcus. Please come in." He sat down slowly, unsure what to expect. Delaney didn't waste time. "I've been reviewing some internal concerns tied to your department," she said, opening a folder. "Your name came up, not as a problem, but as a pattern. Would you mind walking me through your recent experiences with your manager?" He blinked. She wasn't here to accuse him. She was here to listen. Carefully, methodically, Marcus laid it all out. The jokes. The dress code comments. The project reassignments. The thinly veiled threats. He opened his laptop, showed her the spreadsheet he'd been keeping. Delaney's eyes narrowed. Not in disbelief, but in recognition. "This isn't the first time we've had whispers about Blake," she admitted. "But whispers don't leave trails. Your documentation does." Marcus didn't flinch. "I just want to do my job," he said quietly. "And you should be allowed to," she replied. Without intimidation. Without retaliation. Without coded microaggressions masquerading as management style. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt seen. As he left the room, she offered him one final piece of advice. "Keep doing what you're doing. But don't confront him."
Not yet.
"We're not finished." When he returned to his floor, Blake wasn't at his desk.
Good.
Marcus didn't need another smug face ruining the quiet strength growing inside him. But the rest of the team, they'd noticed. People had seen the lounge incident, heard the tone, felt the tension. And now they were watching Blake too. That week, 3 things happened. First, HR scheduled anonymous feedback interviews with the entire department. Nobody said why, but everyone had their guesses. Second, Karen from accounting quietly walked up to Marcus in the break room. "You weren't imagining it," she whispered. "He did that kind of thing to me last year too. I never reported it. I was scared. But I will now." Third, Blake began to unravel. Not obviously.
Subtly.
A little too loud in meetings. A little too defensive during reviews. He made a sarcastic joke during a team Zoom call and forgot to mute himself, mocked someone's accent. The video clip circulated internally within hours. By Friday, he was summoned to the 14th floor himself. He returned pale. Marcus said nothing. He didn't need to. The storm had arrived, and Blake was standing directly in its path. But karma wasn't done. Late that evening, Marcus received another calendar invite. This one from someone higher than Delaney. Subject: Executive Committee Brief, Confidential Statement Review. Location: Boardroom I. Time: Monday, 9 a.m. He stared at the screen. This wasn't just an internal slap on the wrist anymore. They were moving in for the kill. That weekend, Marcus prepared. He organized every file, backed up emails, cleaned his apartment, not because he expected anything, but because he needed order around him. On Sunday, while sipping coffee, he got a text from an unknown number. "Keep your head. Monday changes everything." No name. No clue who sent it. But he felt it in his bones. Everything was about to shift. Monday morning arrived with a strange kind of stillness, like the eye of a hurricane. Marcus walked into the boardroom to find 5 people seated at the long glass table. Delaney was there. So was someone from legal. And at the head of the table sat a man he recognized from the company's annual reports, Darren Ellison, the CEO. The real power. He looked up as Marcus entered. "Mr. Taylor, thank you for coming." Marcus nodded. "This won't take long," Ellison continued. "We're conducting a formal review of managerial conduct within your department. What you've submitted has been compelling."
He paused.
Leaned forward. Your voice matters. But I need to ask, are you prepared for potential fallout? Marcus didn't blink. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for respect. The CEO studied him, then nodded. That's exactly why you're here. The meeting lasted 30 minutes. They asked questions. He answered.
Calm. Clear.
Truthful. When he walked out, he didn't feel triumphant. He felt steady.
Solid. Whole.
By Wednesday, Blake's office was empty. By Friday, an all-staff email confirmed a leadership transition in Marcus's department, effective immediately. No details. No fanfare. Just silence, the kind that follows a storm's passing. And Marcus? He was still standing. Still rising. But now he wasn't alone.
Karen.
Luis. Others began sharing their stories. Not just about Blake, but about years of brushed-aside discrimination. HR started listening. Delaney began implementing real structural reforms. Marcus was invited to help. A new committee. A new voice. And for the first time in his professional life, he didn't feel like a guest in the house of corporate success. He felt like a builder. A shaper. A force. But the journey wasn't just about defeating one man.
It was about exposing a system.
And choosing, every day, not to shrink. The weeks following Blake's departure passed in a blur for Marcus. There were meetings with HR, sessions with Delaney to discuss systemic improvements, and countless emails exchanged as Marcus, now leading a new internal committee, worked alongside the very people who had once been under his radar. It was a strange sense of clarity, a purpose he hadn't realized he'd been searching for. He was making a difference, and slowly, he was becoming a cornerstone of something that was changing the culture of the office. Yet despite the progress, there was always a lingering question in the back of his mind. Why now? Why did everything come to light at this exact moment? Sure, Blake's behavior had been unacceptable, but why had the company, after years of silence, suddenly decided to act? What had triggered this seismic shift? One rainy Thursday afternoon, Marcus was about to get the answer. It started innocently enough. He'd just wrapped up a meeting with Delaney, discussing the next phase of the diversity initiative, when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The message was brief, but it hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. You're not the only one who knows. Be careful. The real reason Blake is gone isn't what you think. It was signed a friend. A chill ran down his spine.
Who sent this?
Marcus stared at the screen, heart racing. This wasn't the first mysterious message he'd received since Blake's departure, but this one felt different. Urgent. Personal. He was no longer just fighting a battle against a toxic individual. There was something bigger, something hidden that he hadn't seen yet. He immediately dialed the number. It rang once, then went to voicemail. Marcus stood there for a moment, fingers still gripping his phone. He hadn't expected an answer. Still, his mind raced with possibilities. Could this be someone from the company? Someone connected to Blake? Or perhaps someone still loyal to him, someone with an agenda? He knew he couldn't ignore it. Not this time. That evening, Marcus sifted through his old emails. Every one of Blake's manipulative remarks, every slip-up, every veiled threat, it was all there. The more he reviewed it, the more certain he became that Blake hadn't acted alone. There had to be someone else. Someone who had been pulling strings from behind the scenes. Someone who had orchestrated Blake's reign of terror. And then it clicked. He thought back to the meeting where Delaney had pulled him aside and said, "Keep doing what you're doing, but don't confront him." Not yet. We're not finished. What did she mean by that? The next morning, Delaney called Marcus into her office. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something different about her today. She didn't offer her usual warm greeting. Instead, she simply motioned for him to sit. "I've been looking into something," Delaney began. "It's regarding your case, and, well, the case we've been building against Blake." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Delaney hesitated, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the edge of her desk. She took a deep breath. "I've been going through the audit trails, the performance reviews, the hiring processes for the past few years, and I found something strange. Something I hadn't expected." Marcus leaned forward. "What?" She placed a file on the table in front of him. The name at the top of the page read, Blake Thornton, Official Executive Review Report. I'd hoped it wouldn't come to this, Delaney said quietly, but I've uncovered evidence that Blake was being protected by someone higher up in the company, a member of the executive team. Marcus felt a cold wave wash over him.
Who?
Delaney looked him dead in the eye. Darren Ellison.
The CEO.
Marcus's mind went blank. Everything he thought he knew, the progress, the meetings, the changes, had just been shattered. His own fight for fairness had been part of a larger game he hadn't even realized he was playing. Blake's actions hadn't been isolated. He wasn't just a rogue manager. He had been a tool, a weapon wielded by Darren Ellison himself, a man who had been systematically protecting Blake's behavior as a way to reinforce a corporate culture of intimidation and control. Delaney continued, Blake wasn't just some random player in this office. He was a puppet. And the strings? They were controlled by Ellison. Blake was put in place to create a toxic environment, to ensure that certain employees were marginalized, to squash any form of rebellion or resistance to the old guard. He was doing the CEO's bidding. Marcus felt a knot in his stomach. Everything was a lie. The reforms, the audits, the sudden shift in the company's behavior. It had all been a carefully orchestrated ruse, designed not to protect employees like him, but to cover up the abuse of power that had been happening for years. Delaney leaned back in her chair, her eyes weary. It's not just Blake. He was just the figurehead, the one people could point to when things got too bad. But Darren has been running the show. And that's why we've had to be careful. I'm not the only one who's been gathering evidence. We have allies in high places, but we also have enemies. A lot of people are invested in keeping this quiet. Marcus sat there, digesting the enormity of it all. Blake wasn't the villain. Darren Ellison was. And Marcus had been played. But now, the pieces were falling into place. What do we do now? He asked, his voice steadier than he felt. We go public, Delaney said, her voice resolute. But we do it smartly. We can't take him down directly. Not yet. He's too powerful. But we have the leverage now. And that means we can make a move. Marcus nodded slowly. This is bigger than I thought. It's always been bigger, Delaney replied. And now, you're at the center of it. This is your chance to change everything. But it won't be easy. And it won't happen overnight. Marcus felt a fire stir within him. For a moment, everything felt clear. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about dismantling a system that had been built to silence people like him, and like Karen, like Luis, like everyone who had been too afraid to speak up. But this wasn't just about them anymore. This was about every single person who had been crushed by the corporate machine, and about the chance to bring it all to an end. And with that realization, Marcus knew one thing for certain. The war was just beginning. The storm outside mirrored the one brewing inside Marcus's mind. For days, he'd wrestled with what Delaney had told him. Darren Ellison, the CEO himself, was the puppet master behind Blake's cruelty. The reforms Marcus had poured his heart into were just a strategy to protect the company's image, to mask the rot at the core. Now, Delaney wanted to go public. She had files, testimonies, digital trails of communications, evidence that could bring Ellison's empire crashing down. But there was a problem. A big one. Marcus's name was on nearly all the new initiatives. His face had become the symbol of the company's so-called transformation. If this went public, his reputation could burn along with Ellison's. There was no telling how the media would spin it. No guarantee the public would understand he had been manipulated too. And worse, the board had offered Marcus a deal. Just days after Delaney's revelation, he received an invitation to a private meeting with the executive board. Darren wasn't present. The room smelled of old money and newer fears. The men and women seated around the long mahogany table had the tight smiles of people used to controlling narratives. Marcus. One of them began smoothly. We appreciate your contributions. You've become a face of change, and that's something we'd like to preserve. Marcus didn't say a word. We're offering you a promotion. VP of Cultural Development. A corner office, full autonomy, and a generous bonus. He narrowed his eyes. Why now? The lead board member leaned in, voice hushed. Because we know Delaney's stirring the pot. She has access to things that could harm everyone, including you.
We don't want that.
And neither should you. There it was. The real offer. Silence in exchange for security. Take the deal, and Marcus would be set for life. Money, power, influence. He could continue to do some good, maybe even push real change from within. He could protect the employees still vulnerable. And most of all, he could protect himself. But the cost?
Truth.
Justice. His soul. That night, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, staring out the window as rain poured down like tears from the sky. His phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. They offered me the same deal. I said no. I lost everything. But I never lost myself. Your move. His pulse quickened. Whoever was sending these messages, they knew everything. And they were watching. Maybe even from inside the company. Maybe they were someone who'd tried to take Ellison down and failed. Or maybe someone who had been close to Blake too. The next morning, Marcus met with Delaney at a quiet cafe far from the office. She looked tired, worn down by years of fighting battles behind boardroom doors. I heard about the offer, she said without preamble. Marcus nodded. You gonna take it? He hesitated. It's tempting. I know. Silence passed between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Then Marcus finally asked, What would you do? Delaney gave a bitter smile. I already made my choice a long time ago. I started collecting dirt the moment I realized how deep this went. I've lost promotions, friends, my reputation is one wrong step from ruined. But I didn't come this far to back down now. Marcus stirred his coffee, but didn't drink it. I want to believe there's a better way, he said quietly. That maybe we can change the system from the inside. Delaney leaned forward. That's exactly what they want you to think. That's how they keep good people quiet. He looked at her. If I go public, I lose everything. You lose comfort, Marcus. You won't lose everything. You'll gain something too. Your integrity, your truth. And maybe, just maybe, you'll change things for real. Marcus exhaled, heart pounding. The weight of his choices pressed down like a mountain on his chest. Option 1. Take the deal. Become VP. Stay silent. Push for slow change. Avoid the spotlight. Save himself. Option 2. Join Delaney. Leak the files. Expose Darren. Risk his career, reputation, and maybe even his safety. But finally stand for the truth. That night, he dreamed of the storage room. Of Blake's sneering face. Of Karen's quiet tears. Of every time he'd swallowed his pride just to survive another day. He woke up shaking. It was time. The next day, Marcus stood outside the office building, looking up at the glass tower that had defined his last 5 years. He thought of all the faces inside, some complicit, some scared, some just trying to make it through. He thought of Darren's smug grin at company galas, of how easily the world bought into his inclusive vision. He thought of what his father used to say, a man doesn't become a man by what he builds. He becomes one by what he's willing to burn down when it's wrong. Marcus turned and walked into the storm. He made one final call. Not to Delaney. Not to the board. But to a journalist, one who had been chasing stories of corporate abuse for years. My name is Marcus Cole, he said into the phone, voice steady. And I have something you need to hear. The journalist's voice perked up. I'm listening. It was the morning of the expose. The sun barely broke through the gray clouds as Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, fully dressed but unmoving. The night before had passed in a blur. Interviews, filed transfers, whistleblower protection paperwork, encrypted calls. Delaney had connected him with a team of investigative journalists at the Ledger, and now the story was ready. It would hit the internet at noon, and the fallout would begin. He stared at the clock. 8:04 a.m. In 4 hours, the company that had nearly broken him would face its reckoning. But Marcus wasn't naive. He knew this wouldn't go quietly. Darren Ellison didn't become a billionaire by playing fair. When powerful people were exposed, they didn't just fall, they dragged others down with them. His phone buzzed. A single text from Delaney. Brace yourself. They know. Marcus slipped his phone into his pocket, grabbed his coat, and left the apartment. He needed to be there to walk through those doors one last time and face it. The truth. The consequences. Himself. When he arrived at Ellison Corporation's towering headquarters, the lobby was buzzing. Employees were whispering, phones lighting up with alerts. The security guards gave him a sideways glance, unsure whether to salute or escort him out. As he passed the front desk, the receptionist's voice stopped him. "Mr. Cole, the board wants to see you. Immediately." He didn't flinch. Of course they do. The elevator ride was silent, but his heart wasn't. It pounded like war drums inside his chest, a rhythm of fear and fury.
Ding.
The doors opened. He stepped out onto the 38th floor, executive territory. No cubicles, just glass offices and silence thick enough to choke on. A woman in a tailored suit ushered him into the boardroom. The faces around the table were grim. Darren sat at the head, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, those predator's eyes, burned into Marcus like lasers. "So," Darren said, voice oily smooth, "you've made your choice." Marcus remained standing. "I did. You understand what you've done?" "I've told the truth." A sharp laugh came from one of the board members. "You've destroyed your career." "For what? To make a headline? You think this will change anything?" Marcus turned toward them, his voice calm, but firm. "I think truth matters. I think Blake mattered. So did the janitor you fired for speaking up. So did the women who left this place in tears. So did every single person you stepped on to climb to the top." Darren's smile faltered. "Let me tell you what's going to happen," Marcus continued. "In about 4 hours, less now, the Ledger will publish everything. Emails, internal memos, video clips from HR archives. And when it hits, you'll scramble. You'll deny. You'll try to paint me as a disgruntled employee. Maybe you'll even succeed." He leaned forward. "But I'm not hiding. I'm not running. I'm standing right here." Silence. Then Darren rose, walking slowly toward Marcus. "You think you're noble. You think you're the hero. But let me tell you something. Heroes die broke." "Maybe," Marcus replied. "But cowards live rich and empty." Darren's fist clenched. "You just ruined your life." Marcus smiled, just barely.
No.
"I just saved it." Suddenly, the boardroom door flew open. A woman burst in, face flushed. She was holding a tablet. "It's out," she said breathlessly. "It's already trending." Everyone in the room lunged for their devices. Fingers tapped furiously. Murmurs rose. Marcus watched Darren's face as he scanned the article. Color drained. His jaw tightened. The video played, footage of Blake hurling a file folder at Marcus. Audio from an HR recording where Blake joked about firing the quota hires. An email thread where Darren approved budget cuts for diversity training but greenlit bonuses for Blake. Darren's empire was crumbling.
In real time.
"You smug little." Darren lunged forward. 2 board members stepped in. "Enough," barked one of them. "This isn't helping." Security was called. In minutes, Marcus was escorted out, not in disgrace, but in safety. The board wasn't stupid. They knew optics mattered now. As he exited the building, news vans were already parked outside. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, voices calling out. "Marcus. Over here. Do you feel vindicated? Is Darren Ellison going to resign?" He paused on the steps, took a deep breath, and looked directly into the nearest camera. "I didn't do this for revenge," he said clearly. "I did it for the people who never got a chance to speak. I did it for Blake, who died broken by a system designed to silence us. I did it for every person who thought they were crazy for being mistreated. This isn't just my story. It's our story." The clip went viral in less than an hour. By evening, Darren had deactivated his social media. Ellison Corp stocks took a 14% dip. And inside the company, employees began sharing their own stories under the hashtag he spoke up. Marcus's inbox exploded. Messages from strangers. "Thank you for what you did. I was too afraid to speak. But not anymore. You're the reason I didn't quit today. You gave me hope." Delaney met him in a quiet diner that night. She raised her glass to him. To the man who burned down the house and made room for something better. He smiled. I just lit the match. You carried the fuel. She laughed. Fair. But it wasn't over. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Interviews,
Podcasts.
lawsuits, anonymous threats, but also support. A new firm approached Marcus with an offer to lead a diversity initiative for real. No PR, no fake promises. A chance to build from the ground up. He didn't answer right away.
He needed time.
To think. To heal. But as he sat alone one night, flipping through his old journal, he found a line he'd written years ago. I don't want to just survive. I want to be the reason someone else can breathe easier. And in that moment he knew the war wasn't over, but the battle had been won. And Marcus Cole was no longer afraid. 3 months later, the city looked different to Marcus. Not because it had changed, but because he had. He walked slower now. Not because he was tired, but because he had nothing to run from. No reason to keep his head down. No shadow constantly following him, whispering doubts into his ear. For the first time in years, he was free. Ellison Corporation had imploded from the inside. Darren Ellison was forced to resign, and multiple lawsuits were pending. Whistleblower protections were expanded within corporate policies nationwide, sparked by Marcus's case. Diversity training had stopped being a checkbox and started becoming a conversation. People were listening. But Marcus? He wasn't chasing headlines anymore. He'd turned down every big offer. The consulting jobs, the interviews, even the book deals. Something about monetizing his pain felt wrong. Instead, he spent his time visiting community centers, holding space for young professionals who needed someone to say, "You're not crazy. You're not weak. You deserve better." He ran workshops on workplace ethics and psychological safety. He partnered with Delaney to launch a nonprofit, the Speak Initiative, a safe resource hub for those experiencing racial discrimination in the workplace. He wasn't chasing justice. He was it. One rainy afternoon, Marcus returned to the old cafe where he used to meet Blake. The same table by the window, the same cheap coffee, with too much sugar. He sat quietly, stirring the cup. Across from him sat no one, but in his heart, he imagined Blake. I wish you were here, he murmured. I wish I had listened sooner. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small black box. Inside, a silver lapel pin, shaped like a phoenix rising from flame, the Speak Initiative symbol. He placed it on the seat across from him. For you, he whispered. The cafe door opened, and a woman stepped in.
Young.
Nervous. She clutched a resume in one hand and a coffee in the other. She glanced at Marcus, recognizing him. You're Marcus Cole, right? He nodded.
Yeah.
That's me. Can I ask you something? Of course. She sat down, setting her things on the table. How did you do it? How did you stay standing when the whole world was against you? Marcus thought for a moment. Then he answered softly. I didn't. Not at first. I fell apart. I broke. But then I realized if I stayed broken, they'd win. So I started picking up the pieces. One by one. The girl smiled. Thank you. He nodded. You don't have to be fearless. Just brave enough to keep going. She left a few minutes later, but something stayed behind, a feeling Marcus couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. Closure. As he gathered his things, his phone buzzed. A text from Delaney. You free next week? There's a university in Atlanta that wants you to speak. Title: Courage in the Face of Corporate Racism. They're offering you an honorary doctorate, too. Thought you should know. He chuckled and typed back. Tell them I'll bring my own cap and gown. As he walked out into the street, the rain had stopped. The sky was cracking open with streaks of gold. The storm had passed. And somewhere deep inside, Marcus knew, he wasn't just healing himself anymore. He was making it safer for others to begin. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a movement, a shift, a legacy.